Today we talk about the 7th chapter in my book, Cultivate Love. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. I understand that some people may have heard the title of the chapter, Cultivate Love, and already their eyes were rolling. Love has developed for itself quite the cliche, and I want to begin by just dispelling that. I'm not trying to say that the world is full of rainbows and butterflies and sunshine, and you have to love everything. I'm trying to take a more practical approach with the term here. Of course, it's been overused. There's a variety of meanings that people have attributed to it and whatnot, but for the purposes of this discussion, let's just describe love as a profound care for someone or something, and we'll leave it at that. This can then manifest romantically, brotherly, friendly, however you want. There's different ways for it to come about, but let's keep it simple. Now, I'll be talking about the importance of love in terms of the kind directed at yourself and also that which is directed at other people. So based on that, you can probably already put together that we'll be talking about why it's important for you to have a profound care for yourself and to have a profound care for other people. And there'll be some constraints there, but we'll get to that. I want to begin now by talking about the fundamental presuppositions of this pillar. And that's basically this. As you cultivate love, there is a proportionate decrease in your sorrow. It is an active process that allows you to view the world in a slightly less grim manner. It enables us to make the best choices that result in the fewest regrets. To responsibly act out of love almost guarantees you an outcome that you can be proud of. In short, it makes life more beautiful. So how did I arrive at these presuppositions? Let's start with the first one, that as you cultivate more love, there is a decrease in sorrow. Well, it's all about perspective, and you'll see that your mind works in that way. There can be an event, and one person regarding it in one way will produce an outcome for them, and another person could have a completely different thing solely based on how they choose to view it. You can view it as a depressing hurdle, and that'll bring you down, or you can see it in a more sunshiny type of way, and that'll change the way you feel about it. If you view things through the lens of love, it will inherently make it easier to bear. It will make you feel less sorrowful. There'll be less gloom and doom. That's the truth. Now, it's hard to get to that point, but it's something worth striving for. Let's use an example that I've talked about before. Let's say you're driving on the road and someone cuts you off. If you choose to view that as a personal affront, as the other person acting as a devil and they're out here to get you, you're going to feel very angry about it. You're going to feel some sense of hatred. But if you just change your perspective to be a little bit more loving and you say, hey, I don't know what happened here. Maybe there's a good reason that they did that. Maybe there isn't, but even if there isn't, maybe they didn't mean to inflict a emotional harm upon you. If you give the benefit of the doubt and some charity and some brotherly love, you won't be as upset because you're finding ways to rationalize the behavior in a way that fits your perspective, the perspective of love. And now the second thing I want to put out here is that it does enable you to make the best choices that result in the fewest regrets. And what I mean by that is, if you're acting out of love, you will be making decisions with a couple of things in mind. The first thing is, will this action cause harm? If the answer is no, then we can be reasonably assured that love is part of the mixture there. If you're causing harm to someone, that's not a loving thing to do. And the second thing, it's something that is drawing out the best of you. It's challenging to actually act in this way, and you can see that through whatever means you want to. In the modern world, there is no shortage of examples on social media. Acting out of rage, posting something because you're triggered, or you're angry, or whatnot. That's not acting out of love, and it will give you some regrets when you look back in the future. Why did you do that? Why did you inflict harm upon other people? And oftentimes yourself in the process. Acting out of love means thinking about what's best for you and what's best for other people. What's going to create an outcome that's not going to hurt anyone. And if you can do that, there won't be much regret here, because you've acted in a way that is noble, in a way that you can be proud of, and in a way that aligns with your virtue set, if you're following what I'm recommending in the text here. And even if you want to get beyond the rationale, you can look at your own behavior. I guarantee there is seldom an opportunity for you to look back on where you acted out of hatred and you feel proud of it, or you feel like it was the best possible outcome that could have occurred. It's just not the case, because in that state of mind, the things you do are tainted with malevolence, and you're going to realize that. You're going to look back on that and feel like you could have been better, you could have done better, and you could have produced a situation that hurt nobody. So, try doing the opposite. When you are tempted to act out of hatred, flip the switch here. Maybe try to act neutral at first and move towards a more loving stance down the line, if you can accomplish that. And we'll talk about how to do that and philosophically why it's important as we go on through this discussion. And finally, this last point here is that as you cultivate love, it works as a mechanism that hinders hatred. You have a certain capacity. You can call it an emotional capacity. You can't experience all things at once, and you don't have infinite room in there. Let's say you have 10 units to spend. You can spend that however you want. 1 unit on grief, 1 on happiness, 1 on sadness, 1 on whatever. The more room that you actively try to allocate to love, the less room there is for lesser feelings and emotions there. The more love you can cultivate, the less room there is for hatred in your heart. That's the message. That is certainly worth exploring, because hate is like a poison. It's going to make you do things that you regret. And here's another example going back to the road incident. Just because it's so familiar. Someone cuts you off and you do choose to act out of hatred. You curse them, you get angry, you feel like chasing them down and cutting them off. The hatred there is going to seep out, and you know what's going to happen. You might take those emotions and redirect them at someone else in the car. Someone does something that's not worth getting triggered over, but you do get triggered because you're so heightened already. Or later on that night, you're feeling frustrated over what happened, and a small thing can set you off, like someone asking you for help with something. It's going to spread, and it's going to ruin things that can still be made good. Get that out of your system. There is irony here as well, because you don't need me or anyone else to explain this to you. After you've acted out of hatred because it seeped into your other encounters, you're going to reflect on that, and even immediately after you've done something, you will feel bad about it. You'll say, why did I do that? Why did I snap like that? I don't know. But you do know. You can trace that back directly to the moments of emotional outrage that have led you to that point. So what I'm saying is, try to alter the mechanisms at play here. Try to cultivate love as much as you can, so you don't end up in a situation where you have regrets like that. Now, with that framework laid down, let's begin the analysis with the self-love portion that I referenced before. I leaned heavily on Nietzsche's framework here of amor fati to describe the phenomenon. And what that means, amor fati, is a love of one's faith. That also isn't faith in the terms of a religious belief, but faith in terms of destiny. It puts forward the notion that, ideally, we should all develop an attitude that views everything in our lives as worthy of love. Simply put, every encounter, every relationship, every heartache, they all come with something unique or valuable to your journey. Maybe a learning opportunity, maybe something that no one else has encountered, so it's unique to you. Nobody else's destiny is going to shape out the way that you're playing through yours. It's unique, it's rare, and you only have one. So why not try to love it? Even if you have these bumps in the road, and of course some bumps can be disastrous, Nietzsche believes that our best course of action is to love everything. After all, hatred will change nothing, and the past is the past. In fact, not cultivating love and developing hatred, as we said before, is just a poison. It's going to ruin things that can still be made good in the future. It's going to seep into things that are innocent, and it'll make them not so much anymore. Love of your faith means accepting it as best as you can, to not harbor resentment for the things we cannot control, but instead to see the silver lining. And that will position us best for the future. Now, here's where I have to criticize it a little bit. I didn't use the framework exactly as put out. Of course, I'm not naive, and you aren't either. Loving your faith can be terribly hard. It's already hard enough to accept it for some people, and now we're saying to go the extra mile and love it. Some people have really rough goes at it. There are individuals in the world whose existence is pretty hellish. It's a hellscape. And saying to love it is pretty naive, and I don't think it's going to help anyone. How I use the framework is I altered it a little bit. I like the main idea, but the finer points have to be worked out. Perhaps it should go like this. Love yourself to the point of not resenting your own flaws and mistakes, and that's that. You don't have to love everything, but Try to love the things that are dragging you down the most and the things that you can't actually change. There are faults within you, some inherited, some created, but either way, they can be improved upon. There is no reason to hate them. Love them for what they are. And if you want to make them better, do that, but not out of spite. When you hate yourself, nothing good comes of that, and in fact, it will likely make you worse because your mind is constantly spinning with insecurities and whatnot, and that will halt you from doing things we've talked about in other discussions, like living in the moment, having guts over fear. These roadblocks that you're putting up for yourself are just not needed. And the second part here, aside from loving your faults and whatnot, is loving your past for what it really is. Everyone has some semblance of a mistake that has happened in the past that they wish they could correct, and I'm sure everyone can relate to just sitting in bed thinking about something that happened before, and now you're running a simulation in your mind, trying to figure out all the alternate ways you could have acted and whatnot. That's not that useful, and it's not going to bring you the self-fulfillment that you were trying to find. The past is the past, and of course you can learn from it. There are powerful things to extract, and that's what I mean by finding the silver lining, but to linger on it, to let it produce feelings of apprehension and doubt and self-loathing, that's not the way to go with this. This is your faith. It is your destiny. It is your past and it's part of you. Learn from it. Use it. Love it for what it is, a source of learning. Hatred, disdain, contempt, that's doing you no good. And now we move on to this other point that's incorporated in the notion of amor fati. Nietzsche said there's a way to test how well you're doing with the framework. Let's say that one evening, a genie shows up at your bedside and it tells you that once your life is over, you're going to repeat it indefinitely. It will end and it will restart and it will end and it will restart and it will play out exactly the same every time. Now, of course, when you restart, you don't know that you've restarted. It will be like a fresh story to you, but the genie's telling you right now. He's saying that this will happen to you. The question is, how does it make you feel? What emotions would bubble up from that realization, from the revelation? Would you feel angry? Would you feel cheated? Would you feel disappointed? Or would you be proud? Would you be happy to do that? He says the goal is to get to a point where that announcement just fills you with joy and you're so happy you can relive the same story over and over again. Now, once again, I think that might be too ambitious. There are many stories out there that individuals have that by all estimates are not really worth repeating in their entirety. No matter how you want to look at it, it's difficult. But I might say, try to find something that's worth living for. Maybe you can't manage to love the entire story, but are there patches here and there that make the suffering worth it? Maybe there are some highlights that you can be very happy about, and you know that when you reach them, everything else that came before and after, it's okay, because that moment made everything good. That moment itself is worth living for. And maybe you have multiple of these moments, and that itself will make the genie's proclamation fill you with some form of joy and happiness. The goal for you is not to make the entire fabric worth repeating. The goal is to create these instances that make it so. To find these patches here and there that make the whole worth reliving. Now, if you're thinking that you might not have that right now, your goal is to create that then. To work towards having these moments and these events that will not make you hate the genie's message of reliving your life, but instead at least make you feel neutral about it. And if you can muster it up, make you feel happy that you will get the opportunity to do this, to go to that school, to meet that person, to accomplish this, to accomplish that. It makes all the other secondary auxiliary pain points worth it. If you can muster that up, and that does come via love, to actually love the story you have, for it the good and the bad, you've done a good job in that regard. And this, you could say, is the ultimate insignia of self-love, to love yourself so much that you'd be willing to relive your story once again. Regardless of how bad it can get or how good it gets, when you equalize it and look at it as a whole, that you'd be cool with redoing it, I think you've succeeded. And that's a goal worth striving for. Try and create those moments that make it all worth it. For now, that's all I have to say about the self-love portion. So let's look at the other type now. The type of love that is directed at other people. This is worth cultivating as well. The first point I'll make is that we should not needlessly make the path of our fellow human more difficult than need be, even if you feel justified in doing so. So, for example, being enraged does not give us a pass to ruin somebody else's day. Love isn't being used in the romantic sense here. Instead, it merely means recognizing the humanity of other people and treating them with the appropriate respect, to appreciate their existence and to know that they are trudging through their journey just like you. And of course, it's manifesting in different ways. We all have a unique story, but to be able to look at that and not feel hatred for it, to feel hatred for the differences that are coming from the different stories that we have, but try to find the good in that. The day we realize that we have wasted our attention dividing ourselves on all these superficial category basis points instead of uniting is the day we will experience the full potential of humanity. Imagine feeling the same affection for people of your in-group, but for every single human instead. The power that would hold is tremendous. It would unite the human race, something that we're all a part of. The truth is, many of us are selective about our love, and we will view people differently based on superficial criteria, such as political belief or your race, your religion, your gender, whatever. That has to end. To view each other as human, to recognize the shared humanity there, that is the path forward, and we have to strive towards it. And the only way to get there is through love. And as I'm reading out this pillar and explaining my thoughts on it, it indicates one of the major issues that we're having today and how it has not been attempted to be corrected. Look at the toxic terrain that we've created for ourselves here. Whether it's polarization or cancel culture, we're not doing a good job seeing that shared humanity in our fellow people. It's actually the opposite. We're demonizing our fellow people based on, once again, superficial criteria. And you may not want to hear that, but it's the truth here. To what extent can you actually blame someone for holding a particular viewpoint? When you look at what's going on with social media and the fact that it's programmed for someone to have an entirely unique worldview launched at them, and the fact that they may have gone through certain things here and here. And that's not to discount the fact that there are beliefs that are idiotic and heinous and whatnot, and I've talked about that before, the various types that have come to my attention, but still, there's a difference between critiquing an idea and trying to destroy someone by calling an idea evil, silly, and whatnot, versus calling the individual that. And there are evil individuals, but we have to be very careful about when we want to use that label. It's become very loose lately, and it's a disaster. Let's stick with the example of cancel culture and see how cultivating love would apply to that. If there is an individual who you feel has the wrong idea or is saying the wrong things about a particular topic, your default response should not be to silence them, to shut them down, to try and get them fired, to destroy their lives, and whatever it is, their ability to provide for their family. These things are pretty heinous reactions to the realm of idea, but they're very common today. And I talked about cancel culture at length on a recent podcast I was on with the Infusion Breakdown crew. You can look that up, but that's not the main thing I'm trying to get at here. What I'm saying is, if you really wanted the individual to have the right idea, to treat them with love, to get them onto the right side, your response would be very different. It would be more educational, not revenge-based and retributional, which is what we're seeing today. You can think about it from an outcome perspective. If someone is spouting these ideas that you don't like and you shut them down, will they change their mind? The answer is no. In fact, they're going to feel indignant. They're going to harden their beliefs because they feel like they are being wronged. They're going to feel like you are trying to curb them and they have something important to say. The right approach would be to battle the idea, to hear what they have to say and give your opinion. Expose them to logic, and there are people who will still refuse that, but if you do it enough times, you say it's wrong, here is why, and if they can't rebuttal you, then they're going to feel and look foolish. And their supporters will drop off too, because some of them will have that regard for logic. But if all you're doing is shutting it down, not entertaining it, canceling people, destroying them, you are creating martyrs for a movement that you think is foolish. Why would you do that? Of course, the answer is because you are acting out of hatred and contempt. in a sort of villainizing, tribalist type mindset. It's not the way to go. And then we also have political polarization here, where anyone who thinks differently than you is being regarded as some type of spawn of evil. When often there is so much nuance to the arguments here that you can find and understand why someone might believe a certain thing. Of course, also, there's always nuance in these points. There are some things that are so foolish and so heinous that someone saying it just rubs you the wrong way. But the response here, if we're talking about cultivating love, helping our fellow man, getting everyone on the same page, is not to cancel them, not to villainize them, but instead to educate, to debate, to expose people to the realm of logic. And of course, not everyone's going to buy into that, but with luck, we can get enough people to buy into it that the opposition is no longer relevant. And that's the way to go. You show someone another path. You don't harden them into their current one by welding them to it. It makes zero sense here, but that's the climate. Not one of cultivating love, but one of cultivating hatred. And that's the path we're on. And if we don't get serious about this, countries will tear themselves apart. We cannot have half the population hating the other half. It will not work out in any way that resembles success. You are free to have your disagreements. You are free to debate. You are free to do all of these things. They are wonderful and part of a healthy democratic society. But you have to remember to see the humanity in people and to try and act in ways that are loving to find a successful way forward. When thinking about a person who has the wrong idea, to me, the first instinct is, how do I get them the right idea? The answer is never cancel culture. The answer is talking about it, debating it, discussing the topic on my podcast at length, perhaps trying to invite someone on who can give the counter story, finding a compromise in the middle. We have to gain a certain regard for this type of process again, otherwise we're on a path for disaster. Now, thus far, I may have romanticized the idea of love to an unreasonable proportion, so I have to temper it with, once again, one of my favorite phrases, logic. You do have to be careful when you're using this tool because it can be double-edged. If you act foolishly, it can hurt you. So you have to balance things here. There is, first of all, one thing to consider, which is the allure of avoidance. So let's say you've been hurt before, and you don't want to go into this realm of love and emotion because you feel like you're vulnerable and whatnot. That's the allure of avoidance, and you have to understand that. It comes from a logical point to act in a defensive mechanism. And the other thing here is the risk of future hurt, because that's possible. My answer to this is wisdom. So, first of all, the allure of avoidance comes from a past history of pain and sorrow. You have to learn from that. Identify what went wrong and what led you to that outcome, and use that in the future. There are individuals who experience these things but never learn, and then they are surprised when they find themselves in a similar scenario. You cannot do that. Learn from what happened and better refine your radar going forward. The things that you're looking for, your radar is going to beep when it comes onto the map. If it's something that resembles a past mistake you've made, you can't go down that path again. Better refine your criteria. And the second thing you should do here is when you're dishing out love, you have to be aware of the quantity. There's a baseline, recognizing the humanity of people. You can do that for everyone. When it comes to romantic love or the feeling of being willing to sacrifice yourself for someone, maybe that isn't for everyone. Maybe that's for a select few who you've chosen using a very rigid criteria. You have to be smart. It's not like I'm saying that you have to set yourself on fire to provide warmth for people, because if you do that, you will burn out in about 2 minutes and the amount of good you produced is negligible, versus you living a life that's tempered and proportionate. You can do that indefinitely. Do not miss out on the wonders that a life of love has to offer. Instead, be smart in selecting the areas in which you display it to its full potential. Regard the baseline that's available for everyone, but be smart in how much beyond that you want to give to individuals. Figure that out for yourself. You have to figure out your criteria, figure out the individuals who are worthy of getting that extra touch, but always try to have the baseline upheld for the masses. And the baseline is powerful itself. That requires some work to see the humanity in other people, especially when they're annoying you or saying things you don't agree with or getting you triggered and whatnot. It is a challenge, and unfortunately, institutions are not giving this foresight. They're not telling you to do that. They're proclaiming the opposite approach, but I want to counter that. Try your best, and I do think this is the only way forward. Now, when it comes to developing the attitude, it can seem daunting at first when you think about it from just the holistic standpoint. But like with many other things, you can begin small and scale up. That's a theme across all the pillars. You don't have to be super grand at first. You can take it at your own pace and go from there. So perhaps you want to start cultivating a love for a hobby in the morning, or a pattern of activity, a habit. In the morning, you have a coffee with the flavoring that you really enjoy. And maybe you're taking it for granted. Maybe sit down and try to cultivate love for that. And then, going forward, maybe you're cultivating love for things you like, which is quite easy. Once you've mastered that, maybe you get into an encounter where someone's pressing your buttons, and then the initial instinct is one of hatred or contempt, or one that calls for violence or whatnot, and you try to curb that, control it. Try to act in a way that's neutral at first where you don't do anything. And then as you get better at that, you can try and figure out how to inject love into the equation. Try to understand the person, their viewpoint, their journey, why they might believe something, all of that. Then once you've done that, you can apply it to a group, then maybe to a country, maybe then to the human race, and before long, maybe you're able to apply that baseline of love to everyone, of recognizing the humanity of people, and not resulting and resorting to destructive behavior when you are faced with a situation that you don't particularly like. At the end of the day, a life without love is more grueling than necessary. Every unit of love that you can cultivate produces a significant change. The more you have, the better things become, at least in terms of perspective. If we can shift our priorities to focus on that, it will be very powerful. Even if marginal at first, that can change our world. We have to focus on it, and we have to pay attention. Cultivate love for yourself and for those around you. It's the only way to go. So that summarizes my thoughts for this pillar. Next week, we're actually on the final lecture, the final talk, and time has gone by quite fast. The final talk will be about applying wit. This is the chapter that I used to tie a bow onto everything. I go through all the pillars again, and I optimize them. I say, don't be foolish in anything here. Be flexible. These are not dogmas. You have to be willing to adjust them to fit your particular situation. You have to apply logic. Kind of like we talked about today with love. You can't be thinking everything is rainbows and butterflies. You have to temper it. You can't try to submit yourself to abuse because you want to maintain the pillar. It doesn't make any sense there. And after we go through that discussion, I'll finish off by going over some quotes that inspired me as I was writing the book. Some quotes that could provide you some food for thought going towards the future. So, that's about it for today. Once again, I will remind you that my book is available for free everywhere online, Amazon, Apple, wherever you can find it. It's called Attaining Fulfillment, 8 Pillars to Live By, and there probably are going to be some links in the description of this podcast. And if you can't get it there for some reason, just send me a message and I'll make sure you get it. I can be found online at perryplatform.org or on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.